Coldbox also comes with testbox, a full-featured testing framework. While testbox comes with Coldbox, you can also download it separately and use it to test your non-Coldbox applications as well. In fact, you can use testbox to test any CFML applications you want. Obviously, the more structured the app is, the easier it is to get good test coverage from testbox. But technically, yes, you can use it to test any CFML application you have, no matter how legacy and non-MVC it happens to be. There are two kinds of tests you can write with testbox: behavior-driven development, or BDD, and test-driven development, or TDD. They're both tests. The only real difference is the style in which you name and organize the tests. If you'd like a more in-depth explanation of how the two differ, there's some information available on the orders books documentation. For our Vandelay Forms project we've been building, we're going to use behavior-driven development tests. These are generally more common in modern web development. Also, you'll find that BDD tests are found not only in CFML testbox apps, but they're also pretty common in other languages such as Angular and Ionic. So you may run into them when you build mobile applications that talk to your Coldbox APIs, for example. With behavior-driven development, we have bundles, suites, and specs. Fancy sounding, right? It's just terminology. Like model is a CFC when the term model is used to describe the kind of functionality inside that CFC. The same is true here with behavior-driven development. Bundle is just a type of CFC, and what makes it a bundle CFC is the fact that it's got our test suites inside it, and it extends the testbox machinery so the testbox knows how to work with this file. You can see an example of a bundle there on the screen. It's just a component, it extends the testbox base spec, and we have a couple of functions inside it. Inside our bundle CFC, we'll have one or more what we call suites. And a suite is just a fancy name for the function that you can see on the screen right there, where it says describe. Then you pass in a human-readable name and a closure. The name is just so when we run the tests, you can see the different types of things being tested in the output, and it's easy to tell which types of functionality you're looking at in that report. The closure is so you can put the test specs inside it. And again, this is just terminology. Bundles are the CFCs themselves, suites are the describe blocks, and inside those suites are the specs. Those are the it statements that we see here and here. You can see in the it functions, it also takes two arguments, a human-readable name and another closure. The same idea applies here as it did with the suites. You give it a name so you can read it in the human-readable format in the output, and in the closure you put all the actual logic for running your test. You can have as many specs in a suite as you want, and you can have as many suites in a bundle as you want. You can also have as many bundles in your test spec folder as you'd like. And you can put subfolders inside there too to organize your tests. So rather than having one gigantic CFC with a million tests inside it, it'd be better to split up the tests into individual different sections, kind of like you would split up the different sections of your application into their own handlers, rather than having one giant handler that covers your entire application. Expectations go inside your test specs. They're a lot like assert statements if you're familiar with those from other projects. You basically tell testbox, I'm going to give you a value, and I expect it to be something, to be true, to be false, or to be an array, or to be of a certain size, or to be a number less than 9, or whatever. If all the expectations in your test are met, the test passes. If they're not met, the test fails. An expectation looks like this. So you've got your function with all your stuff in it, you've got your describe block and your it statements. In this case, we've got an it that's named and has a positive case, and we're just testing expect true to be equal to true. This is your expectation. Down here I've got another one, expect false not to be true. They always begin with expect, and then you've got these other modifier functions in the middle here where you can say it expects this thing to be equal to something, to not be equal, to be less than, to be... There's a whole mess of different options you can have in here for that second part of your expectation syntax. All the documentation for those options available to you are here on testbox.ordersbooks.com. You can look that up here in the primary documentation with all the expectation stuff over there on the left. Let's back up for a second. We skipped a few things in our test bundle. That describe block I mentioned, our test suite, I said you can have as many of those as you want, and you can. The way that works is all your test suite describe statements all go inside a run method, which you can see on the screen here. The run method is what's picked up by testbox and executed, so that's how your tests are run. Up above that, you've got a couple of lifecycle methods, before all and after all. These are for setup and teardown of your tests. Any code you put inside before all will run before any of your tests, and after all, as you can probably guess, runs after them. So you can use before all for things like setting up default data that your tests need, setting a variable to a data source if you've got some test data in SQL that you need to use, whatever makes sense for your application. And after all is the opposite. You can put code here to, say, reset things in your database that maybe have changed during the tests that we're running, or remove any temp files that are created while the tests run if it outputs like a log file or something like that. Maybe you're testing code that generates PDFs and such. You can use after all to delete those PDFs so they don't clutter up your hard drive. All these concepts that we've gone over, bundles, suites, lifecycle methods, the it statements, and so on, writing tests in this style is what's called behavior-driven development. And it's pretty much the same thing in, say, Java or even front-end tools like Angular. The syntax in other technologies may be slightly different, but if you can grasp the concepts here, you can apply BDD to your other projects even outside of CFML. Testbox is its own product. You can install it totally separate from Coldbox if you want, and use it to test your old legacy apps, your Coldbox apps, your Framework 1 apps, or any other CFML you might have running somewhere. It works most seamlessly with Coldbox apps, but it certainly is usable with other CFML projects just fine. When we ran that Coldbox create app command earlier in this video series, we not only got Coldbox installed, but testbox was installed with it. It comes with Coldbox automatically for you via the command box command, just like that. But you can also install testbox as its own separate thing by typing box install testbox, and it will install it into whatever project you want. More info about testbox is available at the official testbox documentation that you can see on the screen here. A slightly different URL than the one we've been referencing earlier. This URL is testbox.ordersbooks.com for all your testbox documentation.